In Hollywood, there's an unwritten rule. Keep your faith to yourself. Cross that line and watch the phone stop ringing. The industry has zero tolerance for stars who won't play by their rules. But these 5 sitcom stars decided their souls were worth more than their contracts. They chose truth over fame and conviction over comfort. Some faced blacklisting, others endured public mockery, but all of them discovered something worth infinitely more, that faith beats fame every single time. Let's start with the teen heartthrob who basically threw away his career the moment he said yes to Jesus. Kirk Cameron. Who could forget Mike Seaver? Had the perfect smirk, perfect hair, and zero faith. That's right, Kirk Cameron was once a hardcore atheist.
So I thought that Jesus was part of a different trinity, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and God.
But then, a chance encounter with a girl he had a crush on changed everything.
And then I met a really cute girl on the set of Growing Pains. And she invited me to meet her family one weekend, and I thought, hey, this is my chance. She's really cute. And the meeting place was at church.
Basically, Kirk landed in an unfamiliar place, mainly thanks to teenage hormones, but it turned out to be the best decision ever. He figured he might as well listen to the pastor's words while he was there, and they touched him in ways he didn't expect. But the real breakthrough came when the pastor leaned in and gave Kirk this unexpected advice.
He said to me, Kirk, if you really want to know if God is there, you need to go to him and talk to him, not ask other people about him. And I thought, well, how can you set up that meeting? And he was like, well, you just have to go to him on his terms, which are humility and faith.
But it's never that easy, and he knew it.
I didn't have much of either one.
Now the pastor's message stuck with Kirk long after leaving church, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more for him out there.
And I remember sitting in my sports car, parked on the side of the road, thinking about the fact that one day I would die, and I would find out if what that preacher said is true. And if there is a heaven, I knew that I would not be going.
And so he decided to do something he'd never done before. That night, Kirk started praying.
I just said, God, if you're there, would you please show me? I want to know. If I'm headed down the wrong road, open my eyes, make me the man that I'm supposed to be.
And guess what? He didn't even have to wait long to get his answer. In fact, the shift was instantaneous.
I just had this feeling that something had changed inside me.
From teen heartthrob to family filmmaker, Kirk Cameron discovered that sometimes the most radical thing you can do in Hollywood is simply believe, and the rest will follow. If you think one unlikely celebrity finding faith was surprising, wait until you hear about the next familiar face having to navigate his own transformation under an even brighter spotlight. Saturday morning cartoons don't usually feature preachers, except for this one guy.
The name is Mr. T. First name is Mr. Middle name is that period. Last name is T. Listen and listen good. I'm talking to you.
This gold-chained, mohawked legend coached a gymnastics team around the world while delivering moral lessons to millions of kids. And this wasn't just entertainment. Turns out that the tough guy behind the cartoon was living those lessons for real. Mr. T came from Chicago's Robert Taylor Homes, where 12 kids shared 3 tiny rooms, and his minister father walked out when he was 5. Now, the projects don't usually produce Sunday school teachers, but Mr. T was different. Before Rocky III made him famous, T won America's Toughest Bouncer, and the first person he called was none other than his pastor. I said, Pastor Hardy, they're having a contest, and when I win this contest, I'm going to give you the money so you can buy food and clothes for less fortunate people in the community. He won over $10,000 and gave it all away. Then just a month later, Stallone called, and everything changed. But that's not to say it's been a smooth ride ever since. Quite the contrary. When cancer hit in 1995, it was through his faith in God that he found something empowering beneath all of his suffering.
I said, wow, I'm sitting there. I said, wow. Then I said, this is my Job moment. This is a test of my faith.
Yeah. Wow.
So I got into the Bible. I said, wow, this is a test. I said, I can't teach what I don't know. I can't lead where I don't go.
Now, if you think this story is getting a little bit too gloomy, then worry not. Today, T is cancer-free, and he still preaches the word of God whenever he gets the chance. And when you think about it, isn't that what faith in action is all about? But while most actors on this list faced rejection or indifference, this next star faced something much worse, a full-scale character assassination for simply refusing to compromise her beliefs. Now let's see how she handled it. Candace Cameron Bure. DJ Tanner was America's sweetheart, the responsible big sister who always did the right thing. But when Candace Cameron Bure carried those same values into real life, Hollywood turned her into public enemy #1. The transformation from beloved child star to cultural lightning rod didn't happen overnight, though. It started when she joined The View as the lone conservative Christian voice, thinking she could bring balance to daytime television. And well, she was wrong.
I refuse to associate myself with you right now.
The guy doesn't believe in evolution, so he doesn't believe in science. History.
I take issue up with that because that does not mean that he's a dumb man or unintelligent, and you can roll your eyes at me.
I'm not rolling my eyes, I just turned my head.
Now, this terrible irony wasn't lost on her.
That whole show started, and it's called The View because it's supposed to be 5 different viewpoints.
Yeah,
it's pretty much one viewpoint.
Still, the pressure became unbearable. In 2016, Bure chose her family and faith over the high-profile position and left the show. But the attacks followed her home when she moved to Great American Family Network and stated that she wanted to keep traditional marriage at the core of her Christmas movies. The backlash was nothing short of vicious. Hollywood elites and media outlets alike labeled her bigoted and homophobic for simply standing on biblical principles. But Bure had learned something crucial.
But the Bible says, but he who hates his brother or sister is like a murderer because God judges the intent of our heart.
Behind that sunny smile is a woman who spends hours in prayer and Bible study, preparing for battles that would break most people. She's producing content that reflects her values and speaking truth with grace, proving that sometimes the biggest act of rebellion is simply refusing to bow. DJ Tanner taught us about family values, but Candace Cameron Bure is living them, no matter the cost. But if you think standing for faith in Hollywood is tough, wait until you hear about the sitcom star who discovered that real magic happens when you stop trying to cast your own spells. Joan Hart. Sabrina Spellman cast spells with a flick of her wrist and solved problems with magic. But the actress who brought her to life discovered that real power comes from refusing to hide your faith, even when it costs you everything. For 7 years, Joan Hart was America's favorite teenage witch, teaching kids that magic could fix any problem. Off camera, though, she was asking bigger questions. Growing up Catholic on Long Island, Hart struggled in church. I just felt like I didn't really connect in church. I tried to read the Bible by myself. When she attempted Revelation as a teenager and couldn't understand it, she kept searching. Now, as is the case with most actors, especially child actors, Melissa's breakthrough came later in life. Interestingly, it was around the time that she became a mother. That's when her priorities underwent a huge shift.
We're church-going Sunday people, and we're Bible study people, and we really try to live a life based on what Jesus taught us. Yeah, we are prayer warriors. We pray constantly. We pray over every meal. We pray every bedtime. We pray on every journey. We pray whenever someone in the family needs it. We pray for people that we know in the world that need it.
But going public with that faith, now that took real courage.
I learned early on that if I waver to other people's feelings or dance around a little too much and trying to be politically correct, you're not really making anybody happy, especially yourself.
When Hart starred in God's Not Dead 2, the backlash was immediate. Critics didn't like seeing her take an overtly and, dare we say, unapologetic Christian role, yet Melissa wouldn't bulge.
Standing by your faith and doing what you feel in your heart of hearts is right. And that's the way I try to live, because you can't please anybody else. That's not going to make you happy.
But if you think transitioning from witch to witness was challenging, wait until you hear about the comedian who discovered that the best punchline is often the truth. Tim Allen, Tim the Toolman Taylor, practically ruled 90s television with his grunt-filled antics and power tool obsession on home improvement. But the comedian behind the character had already learned the hardest lesson of all. And it's that rock bottom is where you find your foundation. When Tim Allen was 11, his world shattered, and so did his faith.
I've had a curious relationship with God since my father died.
His dad was killed by a drunk driver, setting young Tim on a dark path of partying and drugs that landed him in prison for drug trafficking back in 1979. Now, prison could have ended him, but miraculously, it was what actually ended up saving him, because it gave him enough time to really reflect on his life choices. After his release, Allen turned to stand-up comedy, and Disney noticed. The irony was perfect, from Jailbird to Disney Family. Today, Allen calls God the builder.
I always do ask, whoever put me here, the builder, what did you want me to do? I just want a relationship with whoever built me. This is too much, too weird that it happened by accident.
Well, we've reached the end of this list. 5 sitcom stars, 5 incredible journeys from Hollywood fame to heavenly faith. Kirk, Mr. T, Candace, Melissa, and Tim prove that the biggest laughs come from the biggest truth. Jesus changes everything. And hey, if you've enjoyed this video, then please hit that subscribe button for more inspiring stories, because whether it's on our screens or in our hearts, God is always on the move.